Muy buenas tardes, señoras y señores. This is the difficult role. I have participated in SABF many times, and I have looked with great admiration at the people who have had this role before me and years before me, particularly Diego Luzuriaga, who you will have a chance to meet tomorrow. And so I'm going to do my best to uphold Diego's high standards, but this is kind of a hard thing for a number of reasons. First of all, the enormous variety that we saw today, and I will say just a very few words about that. So that's thing one, but perhaps the more important and more practical thing two, is I am the only thing standing between you and dinner. Yes, it's true. And I can only imagine, you know, some of you after a very long day, you know, your mind is drifting off, right? You're trying to stay focused on the topics of the day, but your mind is drifting off. Some of you are thinking of your girlfriend or boyfriend. Some of you are thinking of what's for dinner. Some of you are thinking about where will we go for a few drinks after dinner. So, you know, I understand all that. I mean, I was young once as well, and so these things come out. But we will be able to spend, let's see, 45 minutes, and I've worked in the airline industry, which we try to arrive on time. Believe me, that is our objective. Today, I can guarantee you that we will arrive on time. At 8 o'clock, we will land. You can unfasten your seatbelts and turn on your mobile telephones, and we will be there. Between now and then, however, we'll take a little bit of time to sort of summarize and go through what was a very full and very diverse day. I think you would agree with those two descriptions, full and diverse. And my objective tonight is really not to say, you know, to summarize in any significant fashion or to attempt to summarize in any significant fashion the main points of each of the speakers. But rather, I took some notes today, perhaps just to call out what I'd like to do maybe and I hope perhaps in just maybe 10 minutes, is to call out some points that stuck in my mind enough so that I wrote them down of the various things that were said today. And then what I would like to do is give you an opportunity to say something about, maybe to comment on one or more of the speakers, something that you thought. Not an opportunity to ask me questions because I wouldn't presume to answer on behalf of the speakers, but allow you some time to speak and to call out. One of the things that I've noticed today, as I've noticed in previous SABFs, is that as the day goes on, the demand for the microphone, I want it, give me it, please, oh, me. The demand for the microphone increases. And so there's, I think, substantial, we would say if we were economists, I'm an economic geographer, so that's sort of it, is substantial excess demand, or demand is exceeding supply for the microphone. That means I should talk less, and you should have, those of you that wish to have the microphone, an opportunity to speak more. So just a few things maybe now I have even less time to summarize what was said. So we started off, Admiral Pico from ITBA, just a couple of things that I jotted down. One of them was, I think, a wonderful word, the English word hope. Such an important thing to have as we go forward in the world. There's so much opportunity for us to lose hope, to not have a sense of hope. And so that idea of maintaining hope as you go forward is very, very important. The other thing that he touched on, and I'm not sure that he used exactly this phrase, but I jotted down the need to be curious. That is a very, very important trait. Curiosity, I think, more than any other trait, will get you hired. And, Juan Carlos de Pablo was talking about, get a job, get a job. So you say, well, how would I do that? What would I say? When you are in the interview situation, make it very clear to the person who might hire you that you are curious. Curiosity about the world, about that particular enterprise or organization. Curiosity is a really good thing, and Admiral Pico reminded us of the need to be curious. Then we turned over to the first substantive presentation by Esteban Corio, a very, very nice presentation summarizing an awful lot about synergy, about citizenship participation, about sustainable business, a splendid brief review of the literature. But I think what I would lift up about his presentation, I jotted down, is the role of values, conscious attention paid to values. And I think what that means is that values matter. And when I talk about values, I'm talking about these essential traits that in the world, and this is as true of the Western world as the Eastern world, these essential traits that define how we wish to be if we wish to be seen as good and as righteous. So values really matter. What am I talking about? I'm talking about things like integrity. That word integrity. What does integrity mean? Integrity means doing what you say. Oh, there's a nice idea. Something for politicians. Something to remind the people in the federal capital here and in the federal capital in the United States or whatever. So values matter, and those things are very important, and that was probably the biggest and most important, to me at least, thing that Mr. Corio spoke about. The other things were equally, I don't mean to diminish him, the other things were equally important. Then we switched over to a panel. We had an interesting panel, and I think interesting panel moderated by Jose Luis Roses, one of my longtime friends from Argentina, and with panelists Santiago Arizone and Otmar Hibscher. Very different guys, you would agree, but with really compelling things, I think, to say. Santiago talking in a very practical way, and I think in an incredibly honest way, about being a banker and lending in microcredit, doing microcredit lending. Microcredit, some of you may know this if you live particularly in poorer countries. Microcredit happens to be one of the most important topics at the intersection of finance and development. And has been for a number of years. And as someone, as was said in the introduction, somebody who's been interested in economic geography and therefore in economic development for most of my life, for almost all of my life, I think this is a very exciting thing. And so what we had an opportunity to hear from Santiago was, on the ground, what is it like? I mean, and he was, I thought, incredibly open with us about the challenges. And I thought incredibly honest about the fact that, look, there's no single answer. We can't ask the applicant to fill out an enormous application if she wants 200 pesos or 700 pesos or 1,000 pesos. And then we feed it through a machine, and the machine says, oh yeah, you should lend her the money. He very honest about the fact that we don't really know. He talked about the fact that in addition to lending experts, there were other experts. There were sociologists, and there were people that knew a great deal about the needs of small entrepreneurs, so on and so forth. That was, to me, a fascinating presentation. And then we shifted over to Otmar Hibscher, who gave us, I think, a perspective on sustainability and corporate social responsibility and some other important topics in the framework of a large corporation, in the framework of, this big cement company, and I think did a very nice job of laying out the major issues involved, in that. I mean, just talking, for example, in a very practical sense, when it comes down to this, when he began to discuss, this matter of the environment and of the fact that inescapably cement production first of all, consumes a great deal of energy, and then at the other end of that ends up generating a lot of CO2. And taking that, basic science, that you have to have this. We want cement, we want concrete, we want structure, and so we have these byproducts. Talking about what we do about that, and talking about it in a very interesting and very practical business framework. I mean, this whole idea that some man in Patagonia, a poor guy in Patagonia, finally has saved up enough money to build a new house, and he goes to the store to buy a sack of concrete. He really doesn't care about CO2 emissions. And frankly, I don't expect him to. But it was very interesting. Otmar talked about, sort of those paradigms. And then, of course, he shifted over to, well, what about people that have money? What about, can we get them interested in buying a product that, has a smaller carbon footprint, et cetera, et cetera. I thought that was a very, very useful presentation. And I think the two of those taken together, I think were very, very interesting. Ooh, a lot of notes here, but we're going to move on. Bear with me here. I'm doing this in real time. One last thing about that. When Otmar was talking about issues, and I touched on it a moment ago with the fellow in Patagonia building a house, but this whole idea of consumer responsibility, okay, and particularly for those of you that come from middle income or high income countries, consumer responsibility. It is so easy for people and so tempting for people to put the blame on the producer. Oh, you awful people, your cement company, all of that, all those emissions, all that CO2. Oh, you awful airline, all of that CO2 out of the back end of a jet engine, okay. Oh, you awful car producer, all of those emissions, all of that. What about the consumer? What about the person who buys the product? Do we have no responsibility? No, of course we do. And so I think that was very useful for him to sort of call that out as something to think about as we go forward. And certainly we cannot make any progress in rich countries, in middle-income countries. We cannot make any progress towards sort of sustainability and sustainable development unless we start to, we meaning you and me, start to think about our responsibilities as consumers. That means, just again, integrity, doing what we say, that if you go to the Britton house, there are, yes, it's true, we're Americans, we have 2 cars, and they're both of them hybrids that get incredibly good gas mileage. Conscious decision, let's consume less if we can. But the whole idea there, I think, very, very important. Then we had lunch, always nice. We charge, have some nice conversations, and we come back from lunch, and we get the opportunity for a homily. We get the opportunity for a sermon. We get the opportunity for philosophy from a spiritual person. And Rabbi Bergman, what a cool guy he was. What a cool, I mean, I thought, my only disappointment in Rabbi Bergman was the fact that the translators did the best they could, and my hat is off to you, saluting the translators, but this guy spoke really fast, right? Okay, really fast, because he had a lot to say, and he spoke, of course, because by definition, he is a spiritual person. He talks a lot about philosophy, and he talks a lot about, things that are very profundo, And that stuff is really hard for translators to keep up with. Like, what's the right word to get into English to talk about, matters of the Spirit? But what a refreshing change for us to all be in the South American Business Forum and have a chance to hear from the rabbi. It could have been from the priest, it could have been from the imam, it could have been from the Hindu priest, but an opportunity to hear that perspective. The need to get involved. Who is going to get involved? Who is going to step forward? Now, the rabbi spoke particularly in the context of Argentina and of all the things that need to be done in this republic. But it's as true in my country. It's as true in your countries if you're not from Argentina. Who will get involved? How will you get involved in the civic life of the community? And that involvement can be of any sort. And the counsel that I always offer, that the rabbi said so eloquently, is just choose what it is you want to get involved with, but choose something. Not getting involved is not an option. It is not an option for you. And what is wonderful is if you can choose to get involved early on in your life, and maybe you already are. In fact, I know you already are because I've been speaking to some of you during the breaks. You're involved in the life of your country. You're involved in the municipality. You're involved in the commune. You're involved where you live in some aspect. So you're already into it. And you already have learned the joy of involvement. It's not just something you're supposed to do like eating your vegetables. Vegetables are good for you, so eat your vegetables, okay? Yeah. But you come to realize that if you're involved in the life of your community, that not only does the community benefit, but so do you. And the blessings that come back to you from satisfaction, from somebody saying thank you for what you did for us, those are unbelievable blessings. And those are the blessings that really enrich our lives. So Rabbi Bergman, his earnest appeal to get involved. It was the reception that he got, the applause and the vigor of the questions really suggests that we are, in fact, all of us, even if we do not think of ourselves as spiritual people, even if we think of ourselves as incredibly secular. I'm an agnostic, I'm an atheist, whatever that is, but we still hunger, all of us, universally, for those matters of the Spirit. And so we say gracias to Rabbi Bergman for those thoughts. I thought that was a really wonderful presentation. Unhappily, I was pulled out of the next session with Senor Freire. I have heard him before, so I have that benefit at least. In fact, I've heard him twice before at previous EatBuzz, and I think you would agree, and perhaps somebody may wish to comment on what he said, but agree that his presentations are always really, really interesting. Here's a guy who actually has on-the-ground experience, as an entrepreneur, and then moving on to do some other wonderful things with his life. And then finishing up, how am I doing here? Not bad. Finishing up with this last panel, the moderated is not quite the word. It's more like a referee. It's more like, when we were watching World Cup, and there was one of these referees, doing his best, particularly, for example, in the Spain-Netherlands match, although we won't go any further than that. Doing his best to sort of keep order, because, especially this guy over here. I don't yellow card? I don't know. But wasn't that, you think about, okay, just at the end of the day, when people are kind of starting to go, getting a little tired, you get this guy hugely, hugely entertaining. I don't know what and we'll have a moment, you can have a chance to weigh in here in a moment, but I found him to be, incredibly refreshing. Not just in his, his exhortations to get a job, any job, or whatever those things were, but I think more than that in this idea that, economists don't know everything, okay, and what a breath of fresh air So often, for example, if we watch television, I'll be watching CNN in the United States, and they'll trot out some, professor of economics at Yale, and this guy will be, thank you, doctor, and he'll have us like, sort of like Mr. Know-It-All or Dr. Know-It-All, and it's like, but you know what, the world is not like that. It's messy, and there's lots of variables, and he counsels, get the facts. Oh yeah, that's all really, really important. Once you get the facts, and maybe you can get agreement on the facts, but in fact, after that, all sorts of things may happen, and we simply don't know. And to have the humility and to profess the humility that we don't know, I think is a really, really important thing. Always beware, and I think some of you have already had this experience, always beware of somebody that says, I have all the facts. And this was what was so wonderful about Juan Carlos de Pablo, saying, maybe we don't, but here's what we know. And equally, the presentation from Bernardo Kozakov, very, very interesting. Obviously, somewhat more conventional, but nevertheless, I think very, very interesting presentation. Very, very really empirical and disciplined summary of recent situation in Argentina with some transferability to other countries. So is that a reasonable summary of what we heard today? I don't know. It was sort of my take. What do you think?